hiring and inspiring the right mindset and skills, Heidi Araya. Thank you very much, Heidi.
One more thing. Can I have the clicker?
The clicker.
No worries. I'm so excited to be here. The last time I was in Geneva was more than 20 years ago, but it's my second time in Geneva and second time at DevOpsDays, although it was the Stockholm version. Thank you so much. I'm just so excited to be here talking about a topic I'm so passionate about. When we talk about hiring your Agile team, how can we know that you're hiring the right people? And how is this going to look different than the way that we used to hire before? And so I'm here because I'm obviously really passionate about this topic, but I'm going to give you a little history lesson as we go through. And you may have heard people mention the word name Frederick Taylor, so I'll share a little history lesson. But to make a long story short, the way that we hire in the future is going to be very different than the way we're used to hiring and have hired in the past. That's why I'm here. I've seen a lot of companies that aren't quite getting this yet. So hopefully by the time you leave this talk, you'll have some principles, but also concrete strategies when you go back to your team. If you need to hire somebody tomorrow, what are some things that you can start doing? Okay, so I'm curious. Well, how many of you first are on a team? All right. How many are hiring managers? Get to hire people. Okay, a few of you. So most of the teams that I have been on or have been a part of seeing have been assembled by somebody else, and teams don't really have a lot of say into the people that get to be on their team. I would like to change this, and it's going to take some different strategies and techniques. I also had, a few weeks ago, a couple different hiring experiences, or candidate experiences, I will say. One of them it felt like the speed dating, where I had 2 30-minute interviews over a video call, and then there's like, yes, we love you, we want to hire you. It's like, wait, I didn't meet the team. You're just 30 minutes away. Can I not drive over to meet the team before I make this momentous decision? And the other place, I spent a whole entire day with the whole entire team. It was a very immersive experience. So as we go through this, I will share other things that we have learned along the way about hiring and inspiring the right mindset and skills for your teams, Agile teams and DevOps teams. Why do we hire this way? Here comes a little history lesson, and you've heard the name Frederick Taylor. So Frederick Taylor in the early 1900s decided that people should be measured efficiently. He was an engineer, and he was very, very passionate about process improvement and being efficient, and that is really great. I myself love efficiency. However, he decided that the people who were actually doing the work were not as smart as the people who could tell them what to do. So he did this very elaborate time and motion studies. And then for the very first time in history, we had people giving workers feedback on their doing it wrong. Right? So very specific motions for shoveling and for bricklaying, for whatever experience they were having at work for the very first time. Before, people used something called rule of thumb. They did it the best way that they thought was best for them. This all changed in the industrial age with this book called Scientific Management, and I encourage you to read it. Workers are now measured by output and not outcomes. It didn't matter, so looking at the guy here with the cans, it didn't matter if the cans have quality ingredients in them. It's just about how many cans can he produce by the end of that day and whether or not he's efficiently performing his task. Frederick Taylor also knew that people would not be very happy with this, and he felt, well, that's okay, we'll just pay them a little bit more and they will be happy to accept this reduced autonomy at work. This is the whole basis around scientific management and why we manage this way people today. And so, sadly, we're still living with this legacy. Managers know more. Therefore, they make the decisions. Who gets to be on our team? Who gets to be hired? Workers are interchangeable and easily replaceable, so it doesn't matter. We can just hire some other engineers, same skill set, doesn't matter the human aspect. Individual performance is rewarded over teamwork, right? When you think about the kind of work that manufacturers did and shoveling dirt and bricklaying, it's a very different kind of work. So not so much about team dynamics, more about individual performance. And of course, leave your personality at home because we just care that you come in and you do your job. And this is what we're trying to transition from today. The problem with this way is that it causes lack of engagement at work, and that is a huge problem today. It costs a lot of money. I mean, billions of dollars annually are lost due to disengagement of workers. 70% of workers are disengaged. 18% of those 70% are actually really what's called actively disengaged. They're working against your company, not trying to make it better. They don't show up just not engaged. They're actively working against your company. And it costs up to a third of their annual salary in lost productivity. So, luckily, involving people in decisions like hiring is engaging, and that will increase their productivity. So there are very, very many reasons why we should change our way of hiring and start looking at a different way. So here I'm hoping that you will look at this picture and get inspired, thinking about hiring a little differently on your team, because unlike industrial age, today's work is teamwork. 83% of people say they work in teams, and of those people, 54% of their time is spent actively working in teams, not even on individual work. And I think that 54% number is going to only increase. Okay? Why do we work in teams, especially with this creative knowledge workers? It's because one person can't always know the best answer. When I think about my history and my experiences in the workplace, it's very, very different than anyone else's in this room. That's good because we can come together and make a collective decision. Why can't we leverage this kind of collective knowledge in hiring also? If a manager is screening all the resumes and picking the people, it may not be the best decision for the team. So I'm going to say diversity is one of the things that we can gain by having a team, a collective decision. Much better decisions are made in that increased engagement, of course, is one of those. Better insights and creativity and improved decision making. So thinking about that when you're hiring on your team, diversity is one of those things that's really, really important. Why do we work in teams today? Companies need teams to deliver value continuously to customers. So many companies, and I know it's been talked about before, a competitor can just crop up overnight and overtake your company. A company that's been around for 20, 40, or 60, or 100 years has these legacy processes in place, and a new competitor doesn't have these legacy processes in place that they need to overcome. New companies, easier for them to sense and respond to market changes, but older companies need to start to do this today. Rapid innovation. It only takes one tweet to really change a company's stock price for the worse that we were talking about. And how can we continue to learn? We need a learning culture so we can continue to learn from our mistakes that we made, inspect and adapt and experiment to the future. And of course, we need transparency so that teams have the information they need to make good decisions and make them quickly. So these are all the things that we need teams to do. So that's what we should be hiring for. All right? So before we start on how do we actually do the hiring, I will say this. One of the major pain points that I've seen is that the hiring process is not even clear. It's not clear for the candidate, and it's not clear for the people who are involved in the hiring decision. So clarify the hiring process. What are the steps involved in the hiring process? Who are the people to be involved in the hiring process? And what decision rights do they have? Who makes which decisions? And just an example from my actual past, we were hiring a Scrum Master, and everybody loved this. She had a lot of experience as a Scrum Master and an Agile coach, and she went through a few rounds of interviews, and then one person said, I just want to meet her, and he wasn't even supposed to be part of the original interviewer list, just to see, And he meets her and he says, I don't approve of her at all. I do not want to make this hire. And of course, this left us stunned. Like, oh gosh, well, so he actually did have, he pulled this decision and said, I don't want to hire this person. So it's really, really important to know who's making the hiring decision. How are we involved? Are we advising someone else to make the hiring decision? Do we actually have the final say? Another thing, is, of course, is timing from a candidate perspective and from an internal perspective. Do we have any guidance as far as how long should it take from the time we, let's say, get the resume or look at a candidate and have them come in to the time that they're going to expect a response? From the time that we try to schedule these things, it's really important to think about the timings of how long your process will take. So clarify the process, the people involved, the format. Is it going to be a fully immersive person coming on site for the day or maybe longer experience? Is it going to be 2 30-minute video interviews? Clarifying the format of the interview is really important for the hiring team and the candidate as well to set expectations up front. So why are we hiring anyway? Has anyone talked to you about that in your team? Are we hiring for now because tech skills age very rapidly? Or are we hiring for the future? So a year from now, the tech that we use might have changed. Do we care about this person's growth, and how are we going to help them for the future? If we're hiring, what gaps or problems is it going to solve? And what behaviors or traits are we looking for? So again, it's a lot of there's a study that's called Aristotle study that Google did, and you may have heard of it, but it discovered that to create a high-performing team, it's not technical skills at all. The very first thing on that list was psychological safety, and next on that list was clarity. So these are the things that are really so important for teamwork. So decide, why are you hiring and what problem it will solve, and what do you want this person to be doing in the future, not just today. So let's say now we have a bunch of resumes and we're scanning them and are trying to sort through, and here's the problem. A resume alone is very impersonal. It doesn't tell you the person's ability to work on a team. So how will you determine that? By scanning the resume. So find ways of humanizing the process. And Agile, of course, talks about people over process, but this is a way to bring a little bit more humanity into the process. If they have public profile, things that they want to share on GitHub and Twitter and LinkedIn, look at those. One thing that's really been successful for me is to have my team review all the candidates. So I don't do any pre-screening, and they review them, and they may come up with something, a little unique perspective than I have. Right? So we just typically time box them, and we decide together which candidates to move forward with. And also, don't forget, if we're thinking about people over the process of submitting a resume and you have a question and you're not sure, a quick call is sometimes a really great screening tool. So if you can do that, just grab the phone. You might want to pick up the phone for a few minutes and just ask them a question. So find ways of humanizing the process. And it's ironic to me in a digital age of AI and resume screening and all the keyword and machine learning generation that really we're trying to move away from this process to more human-oriented way of working and screening candidates, which for me is obviously an area I care about. So what skills do we need for teamwork? I already said that tech skills were not on the top of the list. So, emotional intelligence, right? Trust, and of course, psychological safety kind of goes along with this trust. We need the ability to learn together. So it's one thing to be able to learn on your own, but in a team, the way to get to a high-performance team is shared, collective learning together. So that's one of the things that we need. We need to collaborate. We need to support others. We need to know how to give and to receive feedback. And who has taught us how to navigate conflict in the workplace? But these are really, really important skills for working as a team. So I will go through some of these. And some of these, I'm sharing principles. But let's say you need to go back to your workplace and hire someone tomorrow. I'm also going to have some questions up there on the list. And I will share the slides with you so that you have immediate access to them. So for collaboration and team orientation, well, the couple of 30-minute video interviews that I had didn't really tell the interviewers much about my ability to collaborate on teams, or I could tell them all I wanted, but how was I really going to act? If I wasn't sure about something in person, how was I really going to handle this experience? So I would suggest finding a way to collaborate with candidates up front on some activity or some pairing or mobbing or swarming, having them lead a collaborative exercise, even being part of one or maybe leading one. My team of Agile coaches, we would have them come and lead a facilitation exercise. This way we can tell what their facilitation ability was. One of the things that I also love is when candidates ask for feedback. So at the end of my facilitation exercise, I actually paused and I asked them for feedback. So see if candidates ask for feedback or ask if they want it. And when I have offered candidates this, I had someone get very nervous. No, I don't want any feedback. I'm good. But that's the way they can learn, right? Are they open to this kind of feedback? Some of them really accept this feedback very openly. So you can find out a lot about people from the way they act about the feedback question. Right? How about a real challenge that you're facing? This is one of the things that I usually share. So I share an actual challenge that I'm facing, and I would say, how would you handle it? How many questions do they ask? Do they just come out with an answer? Do they try to collaborate? Do they ask a lot of questions? Would they try to solve it on their own, or would they try to bring in someone else to answer that question? And I had one say, I don't think I have enough information to answer this, but I would probably bring in this group of people to help me answer this question. And then it's one thing for them to talk to you theoretically, but what about an actual challenge they had? How did they actually solve that one? So you may want to pick one in the last 6 months or so, or maybe 3 months. Just pick a time frame and how did they handle the actual challenge that they had? Listen for how much detail they go into. Listen for the stories they may share around that, because that will tell you a lot about their communication style as well. Okay. So on this interview that I went to, that was an all-day interview, and it was just back-to-back, one thing after another. And at the end of the day, I just felt like this isn't the place for me. If this is the kind of experience, I didn't have any time, and they basically told me I had to work 11-hour days during this work week to get it done, and this is not for me. I said, an ideal day for me would be taking a break in the middle of the day, taking a walk in nature outside. I'm introverted, and this is the way I recollect myself and I gather myself. So I don't actually feel like I could be best at this job. I couldn't serve the client. I couldn't be at my best for this job. So describing an ideal day, maybe they're very extroverted and then they love to collaborate all the time and never be alone. Maybe they do need that time to collect themselves to get back into the rhythm of work, right? And what are you looking for in your next role? For me, I would say I'm looking to learn something. I'm looking to continually challenge myself to grow, and that will tell you a lot about their mindset as well. How about when they're stuck on a problem? How they would handle it? They might say, I'm going to start with Googling it. How long would they struggle over this problem? Are they going to immediately say, I'm new here, so I would immediately ask one of my colleagues. And this is just to give you an idea. There's no wrong answer here. It's how you would work and how to find out whether they're a good fit for your team. And I had one of the people on a team, and he would love to hoard all the work, and he pre-assigned himself all the work at the beginning of the sprint. So when he was always overloaded with work, but he didn't want to give any of it away or share any of it, so people come to me a little frustrated. So when you're overloaded with work, how do you handle it? Do you share it? Do you, how do you handle this work? So the idea of distributed leadership. So we all need to be leaders, and you're a leader if you have any say and any impact into a decision. That makes you a leader. This is the way I define a leader. And distributed leadership means everybody on a team has to contribute somewhat to the decision making. You can't just sit back and just accept things and never make any decisions at all. But you might want to ask them about tough decisions they had to make. Right? What about selling an idea? I actually had a lead engineer who stuttered and was very uncertain to pitch his ideas, and he worked with one of the coaches to become comfortable to speak out. But he actually successfully pitched his sort of radical for that company idea, and they accepted it. So this is just an example of the things that you might find out about people just by asking them the question, right? What about their leadership style? How do they share knowledge? I had an engineer on a team that was very, very passionate about documentation. That team had the best documentation. It was an example for all the other teams that they would share, because also it was a distributed organization. So information sharing and knowledge sharing is very, very important. In distributed teams, what I call osmotic learning doesn't take place. You have to sort of make this osmotic learning happen. And what I mean by that is if you're co-located, somebody might walk by you and just walk by and say, hey, we made this sale to this big bank, and you might just overhear it, and then it becomes part of your knowledge. In distributed teams, this is not the case. And this has been the majority of my experience has been distributed teams. So how do they share knowledge? Do they like to write it down? Do they like to get on a video call? Do they like to just walk over to somebody? And how, if they're more of a senior person, how might they have coached and mentored others? Any success stories that they have when they successfully coached others? Emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills is another thing that we have to think about when we work in teams. So you might want to say something controversial that you actually believe in. It might be a framework or technology, or say something, we hate Scrum here. But is the person comfortable sharing an opinion with you? An interview is already a very, very stressful time. Right? But is the person comfortable having their own opinion and sharing that back with you? And are they asking questions? Or if you ask them a question, are they just answering with a few words and then holding back? Because this is their communication style. right? So remember, in a team, proactive communication is really, really important. Try to get them to talk about something they're really passionate about. And you may just detect that if they're talking about something really passionate to them, they might get a lot less nervous. So that might be a side benefit of sharing something that they're passionate about. Okay. With such rapid changes in our technology and our industry, we kind of have to be ready to stay on top of changes. So how do we do that? How do you stay on top of industry and tech changes? I love to read books, so all of the questions that people were asking about reading books, I love to read books, and I read blog posts, and of course I go to conferences all the time. But it also meant I had to work outside my comfort zone for a few times, facilitating really large events with 70 to 300 people. That was definitely outside my comfort zone. And one of the questions that I really loved that I got recently also was, what's one area you're working on to improve yourself? If we're supposed to be inspecting and adapting and continuously improving, then we should be taking this personally also. So what in ourselves are we looking to improve upon? Talking about inspecting and adapting, I worked in an organization that had many, many leadership changes. People came and went from teams. The company went from 20 teams to 40 teams, and there was always something that we needed to adapt to. And I actually had to work with leadership and say, we cannot expect stability in this organization. And when people come in, we have to set them up for success by not saying, oh yeah, your team is going to be completely stable, because we just can't control this in our team. But if, let's say, your organization is something like that, where it's rapidly growing or changing and dealing with industry changes, what's the biggest change that they have had to handle at work? How did they handle it? Or a time when they tried something new and it did not go as they planned. I had an activity at a conference, and it was a workshop, and I had this grid that I wanted to share, and I pitched it to friends, and they loved this. Your chart, I love your chart, this is such an amazing grid. And I went to this workshop, and it just didn't resonate with people. So they might have stories like that where they tried something and it just didn't go as planned, right? How have we talked about conflict management, and this is an area that a lot of teams have never ever had support on. But how about a time that you had a different opinion than others on your team? What happened? Or you disagreed with an approach, and how did you handle that? Right? I will tell you a lot about their conflict management style and their way of handling people. Right? Customer focus is also important, because if we're not delivering something that customers want, well, we probably won't be around for very long. So what does customer satisfaction mean? Try to delve into their thinking around how they feel about customers. What would they do if there was a major customer incident and it was just resolved, and what kind of ownership would they take over it? I'll get into some storytelling about a major customer incident in a few slides. But how would they prioritize between bugs and features and improvements? And I had one candidate say, well, customer satisfaction means to me, I'm just going to try to deliver all the features that I'm told to deliver, just to make sure that we're delivering the most features, and didn't think about technical debt or quality or anything like that, right? But that will tell you a lot about how they're thinking of and what customer focus means to them. So again, about feedback, right? When was the last time you asked for feedback? Actually, I sent this slide deck to an engineering manager, and she said to me, Heidi, I see your slides. You're just trying to cut me out of the process here. You're trying to cut me out of the hiring process. So it's not about that at all. But she gave me some really great feedback, and as a result, I always ask her for feedback. So understanding a candidate's acceptance for feedback. All right. So now let's sit back for a second. Now you have these candidates that have answered all your questions, and you really think you like them. Now what are you going to do? You have to do your part too. It's not the end. One of the things that is really, really important is to share our cultural values and our organizational values. And so this is you don't know if you can read them, I'll share, but these are the core values, and a lot of companies have core values. But instead of just saying, yeah, these are our core values, actually I say, well, look, the company I was working for is called One Tenable. And what does that mean for us? Well, when a major customer incident happened and customers were calling us, and everybody was going crazy, but we came together. We came together, sales, marketing, engineering teams, and VPs came together, and we all collaborated to solve this problem, and we all got on one Zoom call, and we worked on it together until it was done, and that is what One Tenable means to me. And it's stories like this, and I will use the word storytelling because it's really, really key to transmit organizational culture, values, and information that resonates with people. People remember 63% of the stories that you share, but only 5% of the information that you share, like statistics. Okay, so I know that is a statistic, but hopefully I surround it with some storytelling as well. So sharing this will actually help people understand what your current culture is like and how you can translate core values into actual day-to-day actions. One of the other things that I will say is this organization I was telling you about that was rapidly changing and growing. Well, we also had leadership changes. Every new leader wanted to come in and make their organizational mark, so they had reorgs. So if your organization is going through this, be honest and be vulnerable and share the pain points and challenges along the way too. I was working at I accepted a job a few years ago, and they basically told me, this is going to be a leadership role, you're going to have all this autonomy to do this and this and this, and I get on site, and I was sitting in meetings all day, taking notes, putting them in PowerPoint slides. I couldn't make any decision. Everything had to get approved 5 times, and it just was not the experience that they had sold me, so I had to share that with them. This is not what you want. It's really, really expensive to have someone come and be the wrong person and start hiring over and over again. So be honest about the challenges, be honest about the great parts of your organization too. What are the expectations? We talked about mental health, and you can say, at least if you were in Vinciana's talk, at least the person had said in the job description, you are expected to work 60 hours a week. Well, be honest about what organizational impediments and challenges you have. Okay. So your candidate is here, very excited about the job. You shared some stuff. They're just getting more and more excited. But try to connect people with their intrinsic motivations. And if you've heard the work of Dan Pink, Drive, there's like a 10-minute video on YouTube that's really good. If you haven't heard it yet, I would recommend that. But he basically has discovered that the things that people want out of work is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So maybe you can find out what their intrinsic motivation means. Intrinsic means coming from themselves. Extrinsic motivation is something like, I'm paying you to do your job. Money is an extrinsic factor. I show up to work because I have my purpose. I want to help others. I'm showing up at this conference because I want to spread this information, this knowledge. So you can use this to your advantage when you're talking to your candidates and find out what really makes them get up in the morning. Okay, so discover their motivators. Why do they show up every day to work? When I was working at a cybersecurity company, I had a Scrum Master come to me. She says, I know why I come to work every day. We catch bad guys. This is very meaningful to me. But so the industry you're in is definitely one of the things that you can use to your advantage of doing good in the world, or whatever it is that connects the person. Okay. Mastery. What would they like to get better at? Does that align somewhere in your organization? And maybe what's their most and least favorite thing to do? That's really, really important so that you can help them grow into more areas that they really enjoy doing. And I've discovered among teams that if you talk about one particular thing that one person doesn't like, a lot of times another person on the team really doesn't mind doing that. And so this is a way you can rebalance activities. Not that we'll always get to do everything that we love, but for example, I love documenting and someone might hate it. So we might balance this among the team. So your best, most and least favorite thing to do is really helpful to know when you're talking to people. The cost of a bad hire. It's not just about time and money, but it does cost up to their annual wage to replace a bad hire. I worked at a place and they made a really bad hire. And this had very, very long-lasting cultural impacts. And I will say, it's one thing if it's on the team. It's another thing if it's across many teams. And a leader that is toxic can have very, very long-lasting cultural impacts. And I will say that after that toxic person left the company, many years later, I call it organizational memory, was still happening. Oh, that person got fired because he spoke up. It wasn't the reality, but it had, and this person, everybody was gone who had anything to do with this incident, but they were still remembered in organizational memory, so it really costs a lot. So be careful when you're looking at these things. Of course, it's stressful on other colleagues if it's not the right person, it's not the right fit. Another experience I had was where a team got a say into the hiring decision, and they said, we definitely don't want this candidate. And the manager said, I don't care, I like the person. And they hired them anyway. How successful do you think that person was in the organization, right? The team didn't buy into this person being there, and the person felt it, and I think they only lasted a couple of months in the organization before leaving. Right? It's really costly. And of course, right, loss of productivity and engagement in the team. Why did you hire this? I don't want to work for this person. Really causes massive loss of engagement. So, where do we find good candidates? All right. I think you could find them right here. So if we're looking at people who are willing to learn and be open, sharing their knowledge, the people that go to open space and sharing their knowledge, right? The people that are coming here to learn more. So attend conferences, meetups. I know you have several here in the area. Networking events. I know companies actually set up events in their own company just to open themselves up. So for certain times they might have like a 5 o'clock small meal or cocktail hour, whatever you call it, a lean beer, that they might open up so that other people can come into the company and see how it is they're actually working. And through those informal connections, again, it's not just a piece of paper, but the person coming to you and being present and sharing an informal conversation, even if you don't need that person's skill right now, you'll probably remember them when you do need that person's skill. And it's this informal connection that you have with people that is not just looking at a resume. Okay, their experience, of course, is no doubt important, but seeing them in person, it reduces the barrier a bit. So that will also be helpful to find great candidates. Have you gotten referrals from your coworkers, even maybe coworkers in other departments? And promote the people that you're looking for. This is the kind of, they already know the workplace, they already know lots about it. You'd be surprised at the great referrals that you can get when you ask people. So this is a way that you can find good candidates. So I will say, in hiring, we need to leverage our collective knowledge. So think about this a little bit differently maybe than you have been before. If you're typically in a situation where the manager is pre-screening all the applicants and the manager making a final hiring decision. Now let's try something else. Let's invite the whole team to contribute. Remember, collective decision making usually makes better decisions. I had someone ask me this question, well, how do I talk to my team about bias? What if they'll pick the person? Well, we obviously need to educate people on this, our biases. There's unconscious biases that we wouldn't know unless we were exposed to our thinking around them. Diversity in candidates is also something. So what I will say, it's educating the whole team about these things can have a really great impact on your entire organization. So understanding biases and diversity shouldn't just be left up to the manager, but it really helps the team understand their own biases also, right? And the importance of diversity. I will say if the team is not bought into the new team member, it won't go so well. So that's a really important part of this. And wherever possible, and not a topic of this discussion, but another talk, is self-selecting teams. So how can we basically set the right guardrails around for teams to self-select and be productive? So you can come and ask me a question afterwards about self-selecting teams. And of course, retrospect on hiring misses and decisions. So if we made a poor hire and he left the company, so we should be thinking about retrospecting on those. How did this hiring process go? How can we improve the hiring process? So after my last talk, I had someone ask me this question, so I will say, they said to me, but how do we get hiring managers on board with sharing this? And here's my answer to that. Try this. Ask for an experiment. So most likely, and I'm not trying to cut managers out of the process at all, it's just bringing more people in to increase the odds and opportunity to hire great candidates. So how can the team get involved from the very beginning? What can we do? Right? This is a question that you might go back and ask your manager. If you're not currently involved from the beginning, what can we do to get involved earlier so that we understand how can we hire better people into our company? How can I learn about diversity? How can I learn about our unconscious biases? Find ways to, together, bring in more collective insights into the hiring process. It's not at one particular answer, it's what your company may be ready for now. And if the manager's not ready, for example, to give you team final decision on the hiring recommendation, then how about going through the whole entire process and having the team just make this recommendation back to the hiring manager? And I will say that when teams approach managers with some experiment like this, frame it like an experiment. Let's try it like an experiment. Let's go through the whole process and I'll provide you recommendation and you have the final say, but it always works out better when you ask for an experiment because they understand this is not a forever thing. Let's inspect and adapt and let's see how it can go better. So hopefully you can ask for some experiment if that's not your experience right now. But our hiring experience doesn't just end with an offer. So the candidate walks on site the first day. Do you know that candidates are much, much more likely to stay if they have an engaging onboarding experience? So again, this is not for this talk today, but discuss among your team, how can we have a great onboarding experience? Do we have enough documentation? Do we have enough, is the laptop permissions ready? What can we do to get better at those kind of things? Because highly engaged workers are 87% less likely to leave the company they work for. And that's the experience that you want to do. So you might say, well, how can I get a good onboarding experience? Ask them. So you have a new hire. Might want to sit down after a week or 2 weeks or a month and say, hey, what do you wish you knew before starting at this company? What might we not have shared that might have helped you make a better decision? Or even if you're happy now, what else could we have done to help your hiring, candidate experience, and onboarding experience be better? How could we have improved that? And then insert that back into your knowledge. So basically inspecting and adapting your hiring process continually by reflecting on it. Okay. So here's some takeaways. Get everybody involved in the hiring process. Really hope that teams can decide their teammates and eventually assemble their own teams. And don't just think about technical skills, but hire the people for the real jobs that they will be doing, right? Learning together, collaborating, inspecting, adapting. And then don't forget to reflect and learn continuously because the hiring process cannot be static. It's also one that you should reflect and learn from. Okay. That's it. So I'd love to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Brilliant presentation. And we have some time for questions. I see some already springing up.
Hello, Heidi. Excellent talk. I like pretty much everything, including all of photos of all animals, and everything was really good. I have a question related to what is actually the difference between hiring for, let's say, on-site and remote work? More and more people I meet daily, they prefer to work remotely. And pretty much everything what you said was towards people who work on-site in one room or much closer interaction. Can you talk about specifically remote workers?
That's a great question because I would say the last time I worked with co-located teams was in 2015. And a lot of this stuff can be actually translated to remote work. So for example, a pairing exercise, we have Zoom share screen. You find a way, there are collaborative, even coding tools that you can get on to do, but this is also kind of experiment with the candidate. So one thing that you might want to do, if your company requires lots of organizing around time, you might give the candidate all the information and say, here are the 5 interviewers that you're going to have. I will help organize your own time, just contact them in this particular way, however they prefer to be contacted, and set up time with them to best fit your schedule. So depending on how distributed the organization is and what kind of leeway you have with the process. But you can use online coding tools and pairing, or have the candidate walk through them with the team. They do exist, those tools. What else in specific that could have translated into remote work?
Not just interviewing, but
On like onboarding?
More like checks whether they're actually good fit to work with the rest of people, because they will supposed to be not see each other, let's say 8 hours a day. they will see each other, let's say, 2 hours a day.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the same thing applies. Like, I did fly to Texas for an interview and I spent a whole day there, but that's not possible for many, many candidates, and especially distributed organizations. But the same thing, they get on a call, they have some collaborative exercise, they may get on several calls, and sometimes I think it's excessive, but we have a team panel interview, then we might have a manager interview them separately. We just go through multiple interviews, so definitely it won't be the same experience, but if you have enough people there doing collaborative exercise, for Agile coaches, for example, we might have them run through a test retrospective. You might have, whatever the role is, try to find an activity that fits what that person will be doing. So that's the way I would do it. But I can, if you give me some specific examples, I feel free to share more with you about that, because I think distributed teams and remote working is actually passion of mine. It's the reality. But I think these things can be, I didn't envision this for specifically on-site teams, because that's absolutely not my experience. So I'll help you translate them where you want to any distributed activity.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fred, behind you.
Hello, thank you for this talk. How can you involve the team at the very beginning if there is no pre-selection? You get a lot of candidates, so it's very difficult for the team to take the charge of this hiring. And second question is, you said that it's good to put a candidate together so that they work on a collaborative exercise. Mm-hmm. So how would you organize this? Would you take a bunch of candidates and let them work together on an exercise? Or would they make them work with existing teams member? Yeah.
So there might be two questions there. So getting candidates and narrowing down the candidates is one thing. Yes. Is that first part of your question?
Yes.
Okay. So narrowing down the number of candidates. So I had this exact experience where a team was brought in and they contacted me, we don't even know how to pick, how do I do this? So the manager is absolutely not cut out of the process, but very, very involved in the process and sharing their experience also in picking and selecting. So they're actually involved, helping in this process. And the second part was, how do they work collaboratively during that exercise or during the resume selection part?
During the hiring process, I don't know when.
Okay, so imagine now that you have a list of, let's say, 10 candidates, that the team should be deciding how they're going to handle reaching out to the candidate. I think this is all a team decision. So the team shall decide, I think I'm going to reach out. I have this question about this. Maybe I'll get the answer. I'll bring it back to the team. If it's a quick phone call to discover more, that might be sufficient. For some collaborative activity, and I have teams that do quick, maybe 1 hour or less coding exercise, just some sample pairing, and it's not really about the coding, it's about how they work together in teams. So they will collaborate, and it's often remotely because we're working in a distributed world, but they find ways of collaborating and doing some work in a public arena, on GitHub or something, and then they find out how the candidate works with them together. But this is actually something it can't be prescriptive, but let's say you're on a team, talk with your team, okay, so what's a way that we can bring more collaboration into the hiring process? Okay, should we start reviewing resumes together? Let's say we start reviewing resumes together. I've had teams review resumes for hours at a time, so I would suggest time boxing that. So let's look at resume in 5 minutes. Are we going to move forward with this candidate or not? And at the end of 5, time box, do like yes, no on this candidate. And so you're sifting through large amounts of resumes at a time. Of course, the manager, again, is involved in helping this process, and then decide the next step together. What's the next step? It varies by company, but I'm saying the examples I'm giving are basically take it to your team and figure out together the next step. The manager should be guiding along with the process that's for your company and what works for the company, because every company is very, very different. Does that help? What else can I answer? Yeah, ask again. What haven't I answered?
I was wondering how you could make the candidate to to work on a collaborative exercise. So yes, if you ask, for example, the candidate to solve some technical problems online with you, so this is something feasible, but how to make them work as a team to detect their impersonal skills?
Okay. Yeah. So I've actually had the entire teams come together and work on an exercise. The team decides the exercise. It could be a coding exercise. It could be just an open discussion where they're asking the candidate questions and candidate asks them back questions with scenario. So it depends on what the let's say a lead developer, for example, on the team. It's going to be a lead engineer, and he's coming in and say, well, okay, so you have some special knowledge in this particular technical area. What I'd like you to do is spend 15 minutes sharing. So create some training or slides and share back with us for 15 minutes. But it's based on the role, deciding what kind of collaborative exercise would work better. Then the team asks them back questions. So it's what you want to get out of the candidate. If you want teamwork and collaboration, it might be the whole team getting together, whether it's in person or on a video call, and sharing knowledge, asking them to document something that they know. It's a lot about not the actual output, but how they handle the interactions in the team. So it's this back and forth interaction with the rest of the teammates that you can figure out their interaction style, whether they're a good fit and a match for the rest of your team.
And for this, is it better to put new candidate together to build a team with only new candidate, or only one candidate with existing team? So what do you suggest?
Are you saying more than one candidate with a team? That could get. I did know a company that did that. They actually had all candidates come together and do a lean coffee exercise. I think that's pretty risky, because what if the candidates know each other and they work for the same company? But I guess they can, on the other end, they know that. But I've typically had people just do this individually. Of course, yeah, if you have a large number of candidates, it will take longer. When you're thinking about the amount of time you're spending with each candidate, it's also a process shift and a mindset shift. Because I had people say, well, it's going to take me so much longer now to make a decision. But you always have to weigh the cost of making a poor decision with finding the exact right person that might be with your company for a very, very long time. And only you can answer that question. But I would say it's not, spending 10 days with them, but finding a right balance of how do I feel comfortable enough with this particular person? Do I know enough? And so find that right balance where you feel like you know them well enough, and find the right activities and exercise. What I found very successful is to go back to teams and ask them to brainstorm activities that they would want to do with the team, because this is another very successful way to engage the team in the hiring and making decisions, because they'll be really bought in if they know that the activities that they are inventing for this candidate will really help them figure out the best candidate. So people are really smart, and give them this challenge and they'll come up with really great activities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We still have some time for questions, if you want. Any other question for Heidi? There's one here.
Yeah.
So thank you for your talk. One thing that I'm very interested in is you mentioned involving the team more, and I guess this whole bias training a bit is very important on this part. How did you approach this with existing teams? How do you sensitize them to these biases that we have there, basically?
Yeah, thank you. So typically managers go through unconscious bias or anti-bias training and diversity training. And I would say the manager shared this with the team, or else brought the team into that kind of training as well. So where there were opportunities, the team also learned. So there's several models just to be aware of your unconscious bias, and one of them is called the SEEDS model. Similarity, distance, there's things like that. I don't remember all of the terms, but just becoming aware of them is step number one. Thing number two is, and when we think about the distributed teams and how we hire, I think understanding, well, if I've hired all the people who are my age, or they all look like me, or maybe I know this is a problem in my city of Orlando, where if I were to find work in Orlando, everybody's gone to the same couple of universities, and they've worked at all the same places. And that's also not contributing to diversity. So I think those kinds of, even looking at the kinds of similarities that we have, like, oh, we all went to the same university, this is great, but maybe not great for diversity, or all of the candidates come from, or everybody on our team has worked at this particular bank or this particular place, but that's also a key of diversity. But I think sharing this sort of understanding with people will then bring it in. And again, people are not on their own. Someone who has gone through this training and his experiences is sharing their knowledge, so it's a collective decision. It's not just sending the team off on their own to make that. But if the team did make let's say that the team went off and they made some decision, and the manager's looking at the candidate saying, well, gosh, do you see that all people are this, they're similar in this way, and then point that out to the team so that they can have an open discussion about it.
Okay, thank you.
We still have a few minutes.
Who else has a question?
Yeah, Murphy.
This might be a little bit out of scope for this talk, but for an individual person who's getting hired at the team, what suggestion would you give someone to be at a team where these kind of behaviors are more appreciated, like being open to learning new things? Like, how does the person on the other end getting hired, find a team that is like...
That's a great question. So as a candidate, how would I find a team that appreciates the skills that I bring and will understand me? I think the hiring experience says a lot. I have two vastly different experiences. One was a hiring experience where I had 2 30-minute interviews, and each time I said, I can stay a few minutes longer if you have time, because I still have some questions. Oh, no, I have a meeting, I have a hard stop, I have to go. And I just didn't feel comfortable with that experience. So I think if you feel comfortable with that experience and you feel like you have enough information to make a good decision, this is a good sign. If you feel like they were inclusive, another example from my recent past is someone was asking the question, okay, so I think only the tech lead needs to interview this person, and then we can just bring them on the team. So if you, as a candidate, only meet with one person on the team, or you're only meeting with a manager and you haven't been exposed to the rest of the team, well, how would you know what that team was? So if you're feeling like you met the whole team, that you had a good sense of how they were and were able to chat with them about your challenges, concerns, ideas around what you wanted for your future. And I think some of these questions, right, what motivates you to go to work every day? If they're asking you lots and lots of questions about yourself, it's probably going to be a good team working environment. Yeah.
Great. A couple of minutes more. Otherwise, we can have an early break, because what's happening next after we thank Araya is going to be Heidi. Sorry, it's going to be a break. Any more questions for Heidi? So thank you very much, Heidi. It was a great presentation.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you.